Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This video is going to be the beginning of the final module that we'll be covering in this course. So in this final module we're going to be discussing construction drawings and CD sets. Alright, so basically what we're going to be covering in this video is kind of taking a look at the basic anatomy of what goes into a CD set and what all you need to be considering when you are taking your project from the design development phase over to sort of the construction documentation phase. All right, so this presentation that I have set up here, this is one that you've probably already seen if you have taken my Digital Application 1 course. But I'm just going to start out by going over the basic drawing types that we're going to have within our CD sets. A lot of this is going to probably be very obvious to you, and it's mostly just going to be review. And then we're going to go in and take sort of a look at an actual CD set and sort of analyze it and try to understand what all is going into it and what all you need to be considering whenever you're actually creating this documentation. All right, so here's our overview of our drawing types. Oh, hang on. Let me switch to construction drawings. That is what I want. All right, construction drawings. So the most basic construction drawing that we're going to be dealing with is floor plans. All right, you already are very familiar with floor plans from everything that we have done up until now. All your projects and everything have probably required some sort of a floor plan to be developed, but floor plan, again, just a orthographic top-down view of a single level of a building, and this is essentially just a section cut that is cutting horizontally through the building instead of vertically. And the standard height at which that cut occurs is going to be 4 feet above the specified level. Again, we're going to be differentiating objects using things like pochets and hatches and also line hierarchies. When we're working in AutoCAD, that is a much more important factor than working in Revit, again, because Revit kind of does a lot of things for you automatically, so you don't have to go in and manually mess with those line weights and things like that. And then there's going to be a bunch of different types of floor plans that we'll be producing. So we're going to have construction plans, and construction plans are basically only the built elements of the space, and they're going to have all of your dimensions and all of your notes and things like that. Pretty much all the stuff required for a contractor to look at it and understand how the space goes together and how it needs to be built. Then we're also going to have furniture plans, which show us furniture layout and also are going to tell us what the different pieces of furniture are, with things like annotations on each of the pieces of furniture that are going to link back to some sort of a furniture schedule or a key. And then we're going to have demolition plans as well. A demolition plan is basically just taking an existing space and it's showing you what is going to be demolished in that space. All right, so things that will be demolished are going to be represented using dashed lines. So any walls that are disappearing or anything like that are going to be denoted by having dashed lines instead of solid lines, so that the contractor knows that wall is being taken out. Also, I don't have it listed here, but another important thing that you'll be creating is finish plans. And finish plans are basically just telling the contractor what finishes need to go in each space. So for example, you would have all of your areas of the floor plan with their own respective notes saying, for instance, what the flooring finish is going to be, what the wall finish is going to be, what's the paint color or whatever you're putting on. Is it a wall covering, for example? Is it just paint? Are you doing tile on the wall? All of that, base finish, ceiling finish, all of that is going to be represented on the finish plan. And then these are usually presented at a 1/8 inch scale or a 1/4 inch scale. Again, but if you have bigger or smaller projects, that's going to vary as well. It's not always that, but these are the most common scales I usually see. And then we have our reflected ceiling plans, and the ceiling plan is basically just showing us all the light fixtures and types of ceilings that are throughout the space. And you're usually going to have some sort of a symbol legend. Oh, you're going to have some sort of a symbol legend on your reflected ceiling plan. All right, so in this example, you can see we have ceiling types. This is telling us if it's an ACT ceiling or if it's just a gypsum wallboard ceiling. You're also going to have symbols for all of your different devices that are on the ceiling. So, for example, is it going to be like a square troffer light that gets set into a ceiling grid? Is it going to be a recessed downlight, or is it going to be some piece of a mechanical equipment? So something like this is going to indicate a fluorescent light fixture, right? But then in other instances, you may also see diffusers or mechanical equipment showing up on this reflected ceiling plan. So all of that sort of stuff needs to be denoted on a symbol legend so that somebody can read that and understand what these different random shapes are within the drawing. All right. And these are also usually drawn at an eighth inch scale or a quarter-inch scale. So it's going to be very similar to the floor plans. All right, you're going to usually have consistency in scale between floor and ceiling plans. Next, elevations. Okay, so an elevation is basically just an orthographic flat projection of the vertical faces throughout the space. So for us, mainly what we'll be concerned about are interior elevations, such as this one here. So like here's a typical kitchen showing all the cabinetry, and the type of information that we're showing on an elevation view is going to be all of the vertical dimensions. So you're not going to be showing any horizontal dimensions typically on a elevation unless it's something like that you can't really show in a floor plan view. But pretty much all of these different drawings that we're creating, you're only going to be providing the information, the bare information that is necessary, essentially, because you only have a finite amount of space, and you don't want your drawings to get too cluttered up. So we're not going to be putting a bunch of dimensions that are redundant or unnecessary. We're only going to be putting sort of what is required in order for somebody to build it, so that we can sort of maximize our sheet real estate when it comes to putting in annotations and dimensions. If you've ever seen sort of a real CD set done by an actual architectural firm, you'll know that those drawings can get very, very complicated, and there's so much going on the sheets. And even with everything that's going on, it's so necessary for them to really manage closely what is going on, what all the information going onto that sheet is, right? Because all of the information on there is necessary, but they only have so much paper to work with on each sheet. So you really have to make things as tidy as possible. So here you can see are those vertical dimensions. And then if you remember, we have a couple different types of dimensions. So we have sort of a hierarchy to them. So here are dimensions that are basically showing us all of the heights of all the elements. So countertop, and then height from the countertop to the bottom of the upper cabinets, and then height of this little top piece here, or the soffit, whatever it is. And then you have the overall dimension, which is showing you the total height of the space. Okay, and this is going to be consistent on elevation drawings and any plan drawings you're doing. You're always going to want to show sort of these dimension strings of all the individual dimensions, and then you want to provide overall dimensions. All right, and whenever we're dimensioning, we're going to be dimensioning from a consistent point typically. So on a floor plan, it's going to be, every dimension is usually from like maybe the right side of one face of a wall to the right side of the next face of the wall, or it could be the left side. Whatever it is, it needs to be consistent. And here on our elevations, you can see we have a lot of these notes, which are giving us a lot of detail about what is actually going on within the drawing. Okay, so we're seeing some materiality. This is pointing out the tile that's used for the backsplash, and then we also have here we can see that this is gypsum wallboard and it's being painted. All of that very important information to be throwing on a elevation drawing. Also, we may not be creating elevations for every single wall within an interior space. It really depends on what is going on. So if there's something where you can't convey the information just on a floor plan, you're going to need to probably provide an elevation. But if you're like, you have the space where you have a wall that's essentially just blank, you might not need to actually put an elevation in to represent that, because it's not really telling you any extra information. So really, you're only going to be providing drawings that are helpful to somebody. If it's just going to be extra stuff that isn't really helpful, that isn't going to tell the person anything new by looking at it, then there's not really a reason to include it in your drawing set. All right. And again, these are usually drawn at 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch scale, pretty common. Then we also have our building sections. And sections, I would say, are a little bit less important for interiors people, definitely more so for architectural people. Building sections are used by architects a lot to sort of explain how everything is kind of put together throughout the building. But we will be using some section drawings probably whenever we're putting together details. So like cabinetry details, things like that. Usually you're going to have some sort of a section view in that regard. But in terms of like a entire building section, that's not usually as relevant for an interior designer to worry about. All right, but sections, these are just basically vertical cuts through a building. And again, usually at an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch scale. And sections are denoted by the section symbol. So it's usually just this circle with this triangular head tied to it. And whenever you have a drawing, and we're going to be seeing this here when we look at the CD set, but whenever you have drawings within your drawing set, you're going to have these symbols here within the actual indicators. All right, so these are going to tell us information like what sheet that drawing is located on and what number drawing it is on the sheet. Okay. And then lastly, the main type of drawing we're going to be worrying about is detail drawings. So detail drawings are basically really zoomed in representations of how objects or like smaller things within the space are put together. All right, so for us, some common details we might have to consider are cabinetry sections or even something with millwork. All right, so this is basically just giving you a lot of information about the entire makeup of some element within the design that is custom usually. All right, so it's telling the person exactly how this needs to go together, what the materials are, what the dimensions are. And these are going to be represented at a much larger scale because they're really zoomed in representations to provide a lot of detailed information about a particular component. So for this millwork section, for example, you can see all of the profiles of the millwork, and these are all section drawings too, like I said, right? So we're able to actually get a cut inside and see how this thing is going together and what all the inner workings of something are. All right, so here, for example, you can see for this millwork, we're going to have some piece of wood blocking behind there to actually support this crown molding. And then you have all your notes, right, which are going in and they're explaining all the materials and stuff like that. So these are going to have a lot of annotations, a lot of dimensions, because they're detailed drawings. They're very, very detailed, and they have to convey a lot of information. All right, so that's the quick review of those basic drawing types. Next, I want to take you over to sort of an example CD set. Now, this one, not that. This one is a CD set that I actually was a part of in school. All right, so this is an example of something that is very relevant to you guys because this is going to be kind of the level you will be expected to produce, in your studio projects going forward. So this was a senior project that we did the fall of my senior year. It was a group project. There was 3 of us on it, and this was basically a building for the Department of Veteran Affairs. So it was sort of like a VA hospital that veterans could go to get checkups and things like that. And it was basically just a hospital for them. So this project was a pretty big project, and this CD set, you can see it's 27 pages long. Now, not all your projects that you'll be doing for school will be that long, but this is just a good representation of the kind of things that you can expect to have to do. All right, and this is not nearly as detailed as a real CD set. I don't have a really good CD set available to show you right now, but real CD sets, although they have all the components that I'm going to be showing you, it goes way beyond this in terms of like the amount of detail and information they're showing on each sheet. Okay, so the first thing to notice here whenever we're looking at a CD set is the front page or title page. So a title page is going to give us a bunch of information about the project. First, it's going to tell us all of the drawings that are within the entire set. So we have just sort of an index here, and this is indicating how many different types of drawings there are. So all of the plans, ceiling plans, elevations, all of that, and then also any other disciplines that are involved with the project. So right now you can see a lot of these are A's. So the sheets have A's in front of them, which is telling you that's an architectural sheet. But also we have some E sheets, which are telling us those are having to do with electrical. And then also there will be M sheets usually, which are mechanical drawings, which are done by engineers. Here we can see that sort of everything that is within the building on a level basis. So level 1 is telling you all the different areas, and then level 2 and level 3. And we also have what are known as key plans. And a key plan is basically just a small version of the plan that outlines different areas that we are focusing on within the project. So the main areas that we kind of focused on were level 1, these 3 spaces outlined in gray, and then also on level 3, this area here that's outlined in gray. So pretty much anything that is not outlined with this gray color is going to be what's referred to as not in contract. So those are all spaces basically that you're not touching, and a key plan is basically there to kind of indicate what areas are involved within the project. All right. Usually have some sort of perspective view that's going to give a actual representation of the project, like a 3D view of it. In this case, we just had like an axon of the actual building, but usually it will be like some sort of like an exterior rendered view that'll be thrown on there. If we zoom in here, usually you'll have notes relating to building codes, all the different code standards that are involved with the project or that you're referencing, that you're meeting. Okay, so it's going to be a lot of technical stuff. And for us, we don't really need to worry about that in a school setting, but whenever you go to work professionally, whatever company that you're working for will usually have a huge list of these notes, all these code notes, all put together, and it will be all standardized and built into the templates that you'll be using for your CD sets. So it's already probably going to be all set up for you. You're not going to have to type all this stuff out from scratch because it's already gone through all the codes people, and they've put together all of the code information, and they will have all of that placed onto the sheets for you. And usually it's much longer than this, and it's just a lot of information, but you can expect to see some things about building codes on there. Here we have some abbreviations of common terminology used throughout the CD set. So things like ACT, acoustic ceiling tile, AFF, above finished floor. And just a bunch of different things, gypsum, all of that. Symbol legends. So in this case, we kind of showed every single symbol that is throughout the project, but usually this isn't like this necessarily. You might not have every single symbol in here. So you can see there's a lot of things like electrical symbols and mechanical equipment like these registers and diffusers and stuff. Usually a lot of it is going to be mainly symbols like this. So your elevation tags, your room tags, section tags, note tags, all that type of stuff. Things that are just more general to a drawing set, okay? These sort of things, these symbol legends with all the electrical and mechanical equipment would usually be placed on those respective sheets. So whenever you get to the electrical sheet, usually you would have the symbol legend here that's going to have all of your symbols that you're using for all of your light fixtures. All right, or the mechanical sheet's going to have its own symbol legend for all of the different mechanical devices. All right, so you're usually going to have some sort of a symbol legend, but usually it's going to be more just on these general symbols like section tags and elevation tags and things like that. Another thing that we're seeing here is our title block. So we've talked about title blocks before in prior courses, but title blocks usually are conveying a lot of information. So zooming in here, usually toward the top, you're going to have some sort of a logo for the company that the project is for. So in this case, it was the Department of Veterans Affairs. So we have their logo there. Then we also had our own logo. So our own logo was the College of Architecture and Environmental Design Interior Design Program, and we threw that on there. So usually that is toward the top or middle portion of the title block. And then there's just some information about the actual school and the course. In reality, in a real situation, this would probably be information about the address maybe of the project, or you might have something in here about the actual firm who's doing the work. So the name of the firm, the address of the firm. Then you're going to have maybe some information about the individuals involved with the project, all right, which is what we have here. And then down here, this is what's known as a revisions chart. So ours is unpopulated because this is a school project and there's not going to be any revisions made. But in the real world, when you're creating a CD set and you're submitting it to be built, right, and the contractors are on site working on things, there's going to be a lot of back and forth coordination. And this is what's known as the construction administration phase of the design process. All right, so the entire design process, we have several phases. We have like our initial phase, then like our schematic design phase, and then we're going to have our design development phase, and that's going to move over to construction documentation, which is what this is. But after you've done all the documentation and you submit it to actually be built, you're going to have construction administration, and that involves a lot of coordination back and forth with different parties involved on the project. So you're going to be coordinating with engineers, you're going to be coordinating with the contractors, you're going to be coordinating with the actual owners of the new building, all those people, and inevitably you're going to run into issues and there's going to have to be changes made to the design in order to accommodate those issues that come up. So you might have some sort of a conflict on site when they're building, and they might say, hey, we can't put this wall here. We got to move it. It has to, we're going to have to move it like 6 inches to the left or something. That's just a very basic example. It gets a lot more complicated than that. But that's going to require going back to the designer, which is you or the architect, making changes to the CD set, keeping track of the changes that were made, and then putting out a updated version of the CD set that includes those changes. So what this chart here is for is basically to keep track of that. So if you had a revision, you would put in here like revision number 1, and then you would say the things that were being changed in that revision, and then the date of the revision. So that's all this is, and that's very, very typical to see within a title block. And then down at the bottom is just our information about the actual sheet itself, okay? So we're seeing the actual name of the project, and we're seeing the name of the sheet here. So this is our title page. We're seeing a sheet number. We're seeing when the date when this was drawn, who was drawn by, who was checked by, and also our scale, okay? So moving on, well, I guess a good thing to cover now would be these sheet organization within the CD set. So let me pull up this other document that I have up here. So I'm going to have this site linked within the module if you want to go over this, because it's going to be very helpful for you as you're actually creating CD sets for your projects. But as you know, within the industry, we have standardization organizations. All right. Try to say that 5 times fast. Standardization organizations. And these are basically groups of people who standardize things throughout the industry so that there's consistency from, one company to another, right? Everybody has to adhere to these standards so that we're all on the same page, and maybe a contractor's doing work for one company and then they get work for another company and they look at their CD sets and it's set up totally different, and they have to go in and try to decipher what's going on. With standards, we're able to make everything consistent across the board so that everybody is kind of on the same page throughout the entire industry, which saves people a lot of time when it comes to, making sense of these drawings and drawing sets. So what this company has done, or this organization, the United States National CAD, they've developed this thing, the United States National CAD Standard, all right? And this is going to standardize the way that these drawings are set up. So one of the things that is within here are the components of the sheet numbering system. So a sheet numbering system is broken down into a few different components. So we have our discipline designator, and that's sort of what I mentioned a little bit ago when I was talking about the A's and the E's and the M's, right, that you're seeing in front of the drawing names. So those are just telling you who is responsible for this drawing, what discipline. Is it the architect? Is it the interior designer? Is it the engineer? Is it having to do with electrical? Is it having to do with mechanical? That's what that is telling you. All right, then we have our sheet type, which is represented by the first number after the discipline designator. So the sheet type is going to indicate the type of drawing that is on the sheet. So for example, if I scroll down here, A1 is going to represent a plan. 0 is going to represent things that are general, like your title sheet and stuff. 2 is going to represent elevation. 3 is section. 4 is large scale drawings. 5 is details, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is just telling you what this is. And then here is the list of all the different disciplines that you could see with this first number here, or this first character here. Usually the most common are going to be A for architectural, G for general. Sometimes you'll see I for interiors, not usually. Usually it's just an A. P for plumbing, M for mechanical, E for electrical. Those are the most common ones. So then after we have our sheet type, we have our sequence number. So that's just telling us the sequence of the sheet in that series. So like, for example, you might have A101, which is your level 1 floor plan or level 1 construction plan. Then A102 could be the level 2 construction plan. So really this is just telling you the number of plans there are, or the number of drawings there are in that sheet type. So in this example here, we can see that we are on the 7th floor plan of the architectural series, right? So if I go back to my CD set here, you can see how we have followed that numbering system. So we have our discipline designator, and then we have the type of drawing that this is. So any ones are going to be some sort of a plan. So you can see we have ones all the way down to here. So here you can see floor plan, floor plan, floor plan, floor plan, reflected ceiling plan, furniture plan, furniture plan, furniture plan, finished plan. So anything with the one is some sort of a plan, and all of these numbers here, right, starting with 0, 0, all the way down to 12, is just telling us the number of plan in that series. All right. And then after that, you can see we move on to a 2. So a 2 is going to indicate an elevation. So here, if you look at the 2s, you can see we have a total of 4 sheets that have elevations on them. Then 3 is going to indicate sections. So we only have 1 sheet showing building sections. 5 is going to be details. So we have 3 sheets of details. 6 is going to be schedules, and then we move on to sort of our electrical. So again, a 1 is indicating a plan. So that's the standard sheet numbering system that you're going to encounter whenever you're setting up your CD sets. All right, so I'm just going to take a look at some of these drawings that we have in here and sort of show you what all goes into these different types of drawings. Again, these aren't super comprehensive in terms of everything that is necessary for like a real project, but for our purposes of being in school to the level that you're going to be expected to produce, this is going to be pretty consistent with what you can expect. All right, so zooming in here, well, you can see we have our overall plan. All right, this is showing the entire building, and we can see that this is set to 1/8 of an inch scale. So whenever you're setting up scales, you're basically trying to maximize the amount of space, or you're trying to maximize the size of the drawing that can fit on the sheet so that you can convey as much information as possible, right? So in our case, because of the size of this building, 1/8 of an inch was appropriate because we could sort of really blow up the plan and make it as big as possible while still fitting on the sheet and fitting in all the information that we needed to show. All right, so this plan really just gives an overall sense of the entire building, but there's not really a lot going on in terms of the actual dimensions on the interior. Really, it's only a lot of stuff on the exterior showing you the overall dimensions. So in that case, what you then have to do, and it really depends on the project, but in this case, because this is such a big project, what we had to do was create enlarged plans. So enlarged plans are indicated by these sort of dashed rectangular outlines that you're seeing. So you can see that we have this one region here, right, if you follow my mouse, which is sort of surrounding this packed Team 5 mental health Team 1 staff space, right? So this is one of the main areas that we focused on for the project, and this was going to require a lot of dimensioning and stuff like that. So because of the scale of this, since it would be so cluttered to put all of those dimensions within this drawing, that's why we put this region on here to create a blown up plan. Now you can see that we also have another one here. So there's one here for this section here. So anytime you see one of these rectangular outlines around a portion of the plan, that is known as a call out. Okay, so there's a tool in Revit for us to do this, but basically we're creating a reference for the person reading this to say, hey, if you want more information about this area of the floor plan, you're going to have to go to this particular page to see a blown up version of that area of the plan. So if I zoom in here, tied to this call out region is what's known as the call out head. And this has our information in it, very similar to what we would see for an elevation tag or a section tag. So this is telling us that if we go to sheet A103, if we look at drawing 1 on that sheet, we should see an enlarged plan of this area of the overall floor plan. All right, and you can see here, there's another one for this area. So on sheet A104, if we look at number 1 on that page, we should just see a plan of this Pack Team 5 area. All right, so I'm going to go to page 104. And as you can see, this is our packed team floor plan. And we're only seeing an enlarged version of that space. All right, so it's all cropped only to that area there. And now, since we're able to zoom in on that area and sort of blow it up to a larger scale, we can add in a lot more information. That would have been very cluttered if we were to try to cram all of it into that huge plan that we saw previously. All right, so you can see just how much detail needs to be included with a CD set to indicate to somebody how they need to build something. All right, so you can see all of these dimensions. There's a bunch of indicators of elevation views, things like that. And there's also going to be indicators of notes. All right, so all of that stuff has to go in here. And obviously, if we were to go back to our overall plan, imagine trying to cram all of that into this area here at a 1/8 inch scale, right? There would just be no room for it. There would be so much text all over the place, you wouldn't even be able to read anything. Even at this scale, with certain spaces, it's hard to read things just because of overlapping, right? The tags are all placed as well as they can be, but even so, they're overlapping with the walls, and some of it just becomes hard to read, right? So that's really why we have to use our plan regions or callouts. All right, so I'm going to go back to that other sheet really quick. Okay, so again, we have all our dimensions, and you can see that we have just a series of dimension strings, which are all consistent for the most part. So these are going to be showing us locations of walls, and this might even be overkill to dimension every single thing. A lot of this stuff is kind of standardized. All right, so in cases where things are standardized, for instance, the dimension from the wall face to the back side of this door, so that's set to 4 inches, but that's a standard dimension, right? That doesn't always need to be noted on a plan. So really, there's a lot of information here that might not even be totally necessary to have. Okay, so in that case, you could put in sort of a note somewhere within your plans. I'm going to talk about notes here in a minute, but you could say, unless noted otherwise, doors are always 4 inches away from walls, something very basic like that. So then that would cover you, and you wouldn't need to put in all this extra information of every single dimension. Really, the main thing you need to worry about are maybe the location from one wall to the jamb of the door to that same spot on another wall. So you would dimension from the right side face of this wall to the right side face of this wall to the right side face of this wall, something like that, instead of doing all these individual dimensions for every single door opening, because usually those things are notated on a door schedule, right? And we're going to be using door tags. In this case, door tags were not used for this project. But I can provide some examples of door tags going forward because we're going to be using them. But if you recall from the Digital Apps 1 course 2, I think we covered door tags then. But basically that would be sort of like just an oval shape within the door opening that's going to indicate the door number and the door type, which then is going to tie to some sort of a schedule that you could refer to, and that's going to tell you exactly the size of the door, the material of the door, all that kind of stuff. All right, so yeah, we have our dimensions, and as you can see, we have sort of our hierarchy being shown with the dimensions. So this is a better example of kind of what I was talking about. So here you can see we are consistently taking a dimension to the right side of the face of the wall. So here this is starting at the corner, and then it's going up to the right side of this wall face here. So there's our 12 foot 5 inch dimension. Then we're going to keep the string going by going to this door opening. All right, and in this case, because the door tags were not used, we actually indicated how big that door opening was. But then we're kind of going up and we're ending at this corner. But usually it's going to be consistently on a particular face of the wall. Then you can see behind that, we have our overall dimension string. So this is saying from here to here, that's going to be a total of 41 feet, 7 and something inches, right? So we're always going to have this sort of hierarchy. So that way the person reading it can very quickly see the basic overall dimensions of the space, and then they can go in and see the more detailed stuff. But it's always good to add all that extra information or the overall dimensions in if you can, because it's just more helpful to the person who's reading it. But if you look at this, we also have a series of notes. Okay, so what do I mean by notes? So notes are going to be these little bubbles that are pointing to things. So in this case, we have this E note that is pointing at this door. So any note that you have is going to be tied to some sort of a legend over on the right hand side of your sheet. So if I wanted to see what note E is talking about, I can go over here to this legend, and because that is set to a letter, that's what's known as a coded note. So a coded note is going to be, you're going to have this key here for all your letters, and then you're going to refer to that letter to see what that letter is talking about. So that note that was pointing at the door, you can see that's saying that that is a full glass panel door. It's made of metal. It's this size, and it's talking about the frame. It's talking about the frame finish, the thickness of the door, all that stuff, right? We also have other notes. So this one is a note for B, which is pointing at this wall. So what does B have to say? This is telling us that the finished face of that wall is 5/8 inch gypsum board. It has to be finished at a level 4 finished, painted with this paint color, and painted with eggshell. All right, so that's basically what a coded note is telling us. It's just pointing at something within the object. It's giving, or within the project, it's giving us a letter to reference, and then we are referencing that letter over here on the side within a legend. All right, and that's giving us all the information we need. Now the way that we have this done here is going to be a little bit different than the way that I'm going to show you how to do it, because there's a little bit better of a way to do it than what we had done in this project. So that's what I'll be showing you. But the general idea of a coded note is pretty universal, right? You're always going to have some sort of a coded note in a project where it's just a letter or a number pointing at something, then you're going to have to go refer to a legend. Now, aside from coded notes, we also have general notes. And general notes are going to be things that aren't specifically noted on the plan necessarily, but they're things that the contractor just has to read through that are kind of implied. So that would have been like my example of saying, instead of providing every single 4-inch dimension between the backside of the door jamb and the wall, you could just omit that, not even include it, and then over here in a general note, just say general note 1. Any door throughout the project is 4 inches away from the adjacent wall unless specifically noted otherwise. Okay, you can just put a general statement like that. So everything that we were showing here, right? All faucets to be stainless steel 4-inch center set. So things that are consistent throughout the entire project, you can just throw into a general note. So that way you're not having to specifically call that thing out every single time it appears within the project. Anytime they see a faucet notated on a plan within the project, they're going to know that that has to be this stainless steel 4-inch center set, right? And there's all kinds of different general notes, but you can see here is just an example of like kinds that are typical. It's usually going to be a lot of stuff directed toward the contractor, telling them how something is assembled. Okay. But you'll usually have those on any plan drawings that you'll be doing, just a list of these general notes. Over here, for some reason, we're showing a plumbing wall section detail. Usually these would be put onto their own sheet, so a detail sheet. Usually they're not going to be included on a actual drawing set sheet. It just kind of depends. Usually, though, this would be dedicated to its own sheet. But here's kind of an example of a detail that you might be expected to include in a project where we're just taking a very zoomed in view at a particular thing that's going on. So this is describing all the plumbing walls throughout the project. So let's see if we can figure out where that is actually being annotated. So that's right here. So if I zoom in here, you can see we have this thicker wall that is 1 foot thick, and we have our call out surrounding that area. So that call out is pointing us to this drawing. It should be. I'm not sure why that says 3 instead of 4. Pointing us here, and this is just telling us everything that's going on with that wall. So insulation that's being used, the actual gypsum board that's being used on the face of the wall within the restroom, information about the plumbing, right? All kinds of stuff like that. Very typical. Let's see, we have some more plans. So this is a lot more of the same stuff. Some more detailed drawings. Again, usually these are on their own sheets. I guess the reason that we had put these on these sheets were to sort of save space for the sake of this project. Because we had the extra space here, we just threw them on the same sheet. Another thing would be our elevation indicators or section indicators. So whenever we are setting up an elevation view, again, we're going to have the name of the sheet the elevation view is on, and then the number at the head of the point is going to be the number of elevation on that sheet, right? So this, if we want to see the lounge east elevation, we're going to have to look at drawing 8 on sheet A202. All right, so let me go to that really quick. A202. Drawing 8 is right here. So there's our lounge east elevation, and this one is shown at a little bit larger of a scale, 3/8 of an inch. And here we're providing all of the vertical dimensions, right? We are also providing a couple horizontal dimensions only because this is something that doesn't really show up well on the floor plan. So we decided to include those here. All right. Typically, though, you don't necessarily show horizontal dimensions on a floor plan. It's almost always just going to be the vertical dimensions. Okay. Also, we have sort of our angle dimensions. So if you have some weird element like this that has a slope to it, you're going to have some kind of a angular dimension that is showing what that angle is. And also on our elevations, we have a series of notes too. So again, the elevations have their own set of coded notes, right? Which is telling us different things than the coded notes that were shown on the floor plan drawing. So we have everything from A through Q, and we basically just went around and put little note bubbles of all those different things, places on the plan. So, I want to see what node H says. See what node H says. Solid surface quartz counter. All right, the manufacturer is DuPont. The color is cloud white, and the sizes are based on the plans. Okay, we're going to do it a little bit differently when we're actually doing it in Revit, but that is one method that can be used, and that's a very common method that you would see for a CD set done in like AutoCAD. However, since we're using Revit and Revit's intelligent, we can do something that's a little bit better than this. That's going to be a lot more automatic for us, okay? This is a very manual process of just creating these text annotations and placing them and tying arrows to them. So we're going to do it a little bit differently than that, but you should get the general idea of a coded note and also sort of a general note. So let me hop back to my plan drawing here, see if there's anything else I need to talk about with that. I think that's pretty good for that one. So moving on, we have a reflected ceiling plan. All right, so this reflected ceiling plan is kind of crazy because we have this wood slat ceiling throughout the space. So that's what all this dark stuff is. This is wood slat ceiling with a bunch of linear lights. Let me see if I have another plan in here. Okay, so this one is going to be a lot more typical of something that you would see. So anywhere we have a grid, that's going to be some sort of an ACT ceiling, so acoustic ceiling tile. Then you're going to have some sort of a tag on here that's going to indicate to you the height of the ceiling. So we have our ceiling tag that's telling us that this is going to be above, or it's going to be 12 feet above the finished floor. All right. Out in this space, you can see that this ceiling is a foot higher and that this is a gypsum ceiling and not an ACT ceiling. Okay. Now, our gypsum ceiling here, it's just shown as a white ceiling. Usually you would have some sort of a hatch pattern though that would indicate a change of material. So we'll be covering that within Revit when we take a look at the ceiling plan. But we're also including a bunch of dimensions here that are showing us placements of things like the light fixtures. So anything that is necessary to know where these need to be placed and spaced, that's all going to be indicated on a ceiling plan. So usually things that are within a gypsum ceiling, you're going to have to provide dimensions for because you don't really have a point of reference with a gypsum ceiling, right? It's just basically a continuous flat plane, and these lights could just be anywhere within that plane. With a ACT ceiling, on the other hand, you have a grid that you can work with. So this grid is going to be 2 foot by 2 foot standard, right? All these squares are 2 foot by 2 foot. So by having this grid, you don't really need to provide dimensions, right? If a person, the contractor who's putting in the ceiling looked at this, they would know, okay, there's going to be 4 full ceiling tiles from left to right, and there's going to be 6 full ceiling tiles from front to back. Those 6 ceiling tiles are going to fit perfectly in the space. And what I need to do is basically just center out these 4 ceiling tiles, and then I'm going to have a half tile on either side. Okay, so they're going to look at that, and that's going to give them all the information they need to build the ceiling grid in. Once they built the grid in, they just have to look at which tile the things go into. So in this example, these light fixtures are going to be placed in these 4 areas, right? So you're going to have a total of 4 of them, and you're just going to look at the grid where those need to go. So with an ACT ceiling, you don't really have to provide all those dimensions because it's kind of unnecessary. Somebody could figure out where all this needs to go without even needing those dimensions. But on a gypsum ceiling, right, you're going to have to indicate those locations so that somebody knows where in that gypsum ceiling these things have to be placed. All right, so that's going to be very important. But you don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to do too much. In this case, you can see over here we didn't really provide those dimensions because it's kind of the spacing between them is consistent, right? It's always going to be this 5 foot 2 inch spacing, right? So things like that you could also indicate in some sort of a note, like all light fixtures, all recessed can lights that are this type of light fixture need to be spaced 5 foot 2 inches apart, something like that. And then you just need to provide the distance away from the wall for the first one. You know, whatever you have to do to be creative, to relay the same information in as concise of a manner as possible, you can do that. And then, like I said, we have our lighting legend. Okay, so when we looked at our first sheet, our title sheet, we had our legends that we were showing, and the lighting legend was included in there. But I mentioned, usually that's just going to be things like your general drafting symbols. So here you can see, like I mentioned, we have our lighting legend, which is showing us all the different objects that are showing up on our ceiling. So, right, so we can see anything that looks like that is going to be an LED recessed troffer fixture. Anything with an X through it is going to be a square supply diffuser. Anything with a single diagonal line through it is going to be a return register, right? All of that. That's what that's going to tell the person looking at this. It's also common to see our key plans too. We're not really going to worry about key plans for the sake of our projects we're doing here in an academic setting, but key plans are useful for really large projects like this, right? Because somebody can look at this and say, oh, that's the area in the building where this is taking place, right? Since we're not showing the entire floor plan, just a zoomed in portion of the entire floor plan, it's useful to have this key plan down here to indicate where in the building we are looking at, okay? Again, more ceiling plans, so more lighting legends. And then we have furniture plans. So if we look at these furniture plans, these are basically just giving us the furniture layout. So there's not going to be any dimensions on this plan unless they're critical and necessary for the placement of something, right? Usually though, you're not going to have to worry about dimensioning anything on a furniture plan because the placement of furniture, it's all movable, right? You don't have to really worry too much about being precise with it. As long as they place it in the general area, in that layout, it's usually fine. So we're going to be placing all of our pieces of furniture, and then we're going to be applying these tags to them. So these are our furniture tags, and the furniture tags are going to be tied to a furniture schedule, which is going to give us all the information about what you're seeing here. So if I want to know what the heck an F2 is, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go down here to my furniture schedule. I'm going to find F2, and that's telling me that's some kind of an electronic. So that is a portal ID kiosk. It's made by Kiosk Information System. These are the dimensions of it, right? And there's the finished material. So in that case, since it's a kiosk, it's just aluminum. But let's say we have an actual like chair or something. So F6. So what is F6? F6 is going to be a focused cafe stool made by steel case turnstone. It's going to be that size. The wood finish on it is going to be this Formica material. But then in some cases, other pieces of furniture, maybe they have upholstery. So this one here is this calm fabric. The seat's going to have this upholstery, and the back's going to have this upholstery. Okay? So all of that's the type of information that's going to be provided within a furniture schedule, right? And then you're just having these tags, or these like, it's really like the coded notes. You're just having a little tag that's indicating what the thing is, and then you're just applying that number to those individual objects. And in Revit, adding these tags is a super easy process, and we're going to be learning how to do that. But you can expect to have a lot of these schedules throughout all of your sheets, because looking at a plan only tells you so much about what's going on. Really, you're going to have to look at it, and you're going to need to go and get more information, and that information is going to be found in some sort of a schedule or a legend. Okay? So more furniture plans. Okay, finished plans. So finished plans are also going to be very important. So like I said, these are going to tell you all the finishes within every single space. So if I zoom in here, and I'll cover this method later on. This really isn't like the best method to use in Revit, but it is a common method that you might see within the field. people using. The way that we did it in this project is every single room we provided this sort of tagging system. So you can see we have 4 different tags all next to each other. So what this is telling us is 4 things. It's telling us the floor finish. It's telling us the wall finish. It's telling us the ceiling finish, I believe, and then it's telling us the base finish. Okay, so in this area we have flooring 2, we have paint 2, we have, I'm not sure what TR is, I'll have to look at the schedule. Then we have B1. Okay, so if I want to see what those things mean now, I can come down here to this legend. This legend is telling us floor finish, wall finish, trim finish, and then the wall base. Usually you would also have like ceiling finish in here too, but in this case we did not. I think probably because we had the same ceiling finish throughout most of the spaces, so that was something we could just throw on a general note, like any gypsum ceiling is going to be painted with Sherwin-Williams white or whatever. Okay, but over here is the finish schedule. Okay, so if you remember, that was flooring 2. So that is a vinyl flooring made by Forbo. The product is Nordstar. The finish color is Evolve. And then finish NA, because that's just a standard thing. But some of them, like if it's a tile, you might have a matte or you might have a polish or eggshell, right? And then you might have some additional notes about it, just providing more information. Maybe it's like the dimensions or something like that. But that's really all this is. So we have all our flooring finishes. We have our wall finishes, which are, we have glazed tiles, or we have paint, or we have paneling, or a wall covering. And then we have our different trims. So we have 2 different types in this project. So a room can either have trim 1 or trim 2. And then we have our base material. So in this case, we had a metal base. It's also common to use things like vinyl base. So you might have a few different types that you're using throughout the project in different areas. So maybe your main areas are something that's a little bit more fancy and expensive, because those are your more public areas and a lot of people are going to be seeing them. But then maybe your more private areas that not a lot of people are going to be seeing are things that are less expensive. So things like vinyl, for instance. But your finish plans are basically just this, where you're going around to every single room and you're saying what all those different finishes for all those surfaces, all those hard surfaces are. Okay, so flooring, ceiling, trim, base, all that kind of stuff. Then we get into our elevations, which I kind of already talked about. Again, it's just those coded notes in our vertical dimensions usually, and any annotations that are going to point out something specific that we couldn't tell just by looking at the drawing. So you can see just how many elevations we had. And this was because there was a lot going on in the project in terms of like these transom windows and all that. We kind of needed to really show it through an elevation. So you might have a ton of elevation sheets just showing all kinds of stuff that's going on, depending on how big the project is. So more elevations, more elevations. You can see there's just tons of them. More elevations, more elevations. So in these elevations, we're also seeing a little bit more. So here is a sort of reference to the type of material that is being put into these bathrooms. So in this case, we're using a ceramic tile on these walls, but we didn't really need to show the entire hatch pattern because that would have been really messy, right? You can imagine all these lines being shown throughout the entire drawing with everything else going on, all the annotations and stuff. That would have been difficult to do, to represent, and it would have been harder to read. So one way you can do it, which is what we did in this case, is just to provide a small portion of the hatch so that somebody looking at this can say, oh, okay, I understand what that's supposed to look like and what material that is, but you don't need to show it on the entire thing. So that's what we did for all these bathroom elevations, is we just showed a little bit of the tile just to give the installer a picture of the installation pattern. So some of them were vertical, some of them were horizontal, some of them were these larger format tiles, and some of them were the smaller format tiles. Large overall building sections. Again, these were not very detailed because these are typically handled by architects. Things like these interior elevations are what us as interior designers are going to be focused on and worrying about. Things like these building sections, they were a requirement for the project, but we didn't really have to detail them out like we did the other ones, just because this is what an architect would do. All right, and our professors understood that. They wanted us to show them, but we didn't have to go in and put in all those crazy notes and show how everything was going together, because it's not going to be our job to be designing the shell of the building, right? The shell of the building is going to be mainly done for you. You're mainly just working on the interior details, like all of this stuff, right? And then we get into the detailed drawings. So in this case, we provided detailed drawings of our custom reception desk. Now, that's what the project, in this case, our school project, required. They said, just pick one element or a few elements from the space that are custom that you want to show how it all goes together. In reality, in a real project, it's not going to be like that. You're going to have to provide detailed drawings for anything that's custom throughout the space that you need to show how is built. Also, a lot of this stuff though is standardized, so you might not necessarily be creating these things from scratch. Usually, a company you'll be working for is going to have like a pre-made library of detailed drawings that you'll be able to pull from and then just throw on your drawing sheets. So you might not need to be making all these on your own, starting from scratch. But in this case, you can see we provided these blown up drawings of the different sides of the desk. So there's the front elevation, the back elevation, and then the two side elevations. And then we also provided a section through it, which is kind of showing how all the structure of the desk is assembled. And we're putting in all these notes about the different materials that are used for the desk, right? Construction. And then just an axon view showing the desk sort of overall, right? But again, these are going to be a lot larger of a scale than a lot of the other drawings within the drawing set, because we're providing a lot of detail, so we have to zoom in really close and really show how all of those things are put together. And we'll probably have to provide a lot of really small dimensions here. Like you can see we have 1 inch and 2 inch dimensions. Sometimes it even gets smaller than that, like 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1/4 inch. You really just have to zoom in and make it as big as you can to convey the information that's required. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. So here's some details about our slat wall that we have in the reception area. Usually within your drawing set, you're going to have some page that just is only of wall details, that is just showing these sections of these different wall types throughout the projects, that's showing how they are put together. That's kind of what you're seeing in this case, but like I said, it's usually just going to be a bunch of wall sections, because you're going to have a ton of different types of walls throughout a project. Usually you'll have your common ones, but then you'll also have ones that are dealing with plumbing, or you'll have exterior walls, which are going to be handled by architects. But all that stuff has to be detailed through a section view within these wall detail sheets. Okay, so in this case, we just did our slat wall, but usually you'd have a lot more than that. But it's just showing like sort of how everything goes together. Now you can also see we have a call out for a particular area of this. So this call out is providing additional detail for these wall slats. And this call out head is not placed very well, but if you go to sheet A501, drawing number 4, we're going to be able to see a little bit more about how that slat system works. So 501 drawing 4, that's just referring to this. So you can see we have these clips that are holding the actual system in place, and those are being nailed into the structure above. So that's really all that is showing. Um, see, that is details of the bench. And then that's just the front elevation view of the wall itself. Here are some details about counters. So this is something that is a lot more consistent from project to project that you would typically see. But cabinetry details, you'll probably run into these a lot, where you're specifying, how the cabinetry integrates with custom elements like reception desks and things like that, or these like cafe bars, different areas, like kitchens and stuff like that. You'll probably run into a lot of these cabinetry details. And then we have our lighting plans. So our lighting plans, this one is only showing the switching. So all of these arced lines are showing us the circuit and how the lights are connected to one another. So you can see anything that is an S is going to represent a light switch and the light switch's location. And then these arced lines are connecting all the lights in that circuit together, and it's showing you what all is controlled by that single switch. You might not necessarily have to do this in your projects in reality. Usually a lot of this would be handled by your lighting engineers or electrical engineers, people like that. But you should understand what all these symbols mean and what goes into these different types of plans. We'll also have a legend, right, for that. So here's our switch legend: single toggle switch, dimmer switch, three-way switch with dimmer, three-way switch without a dimmer, all of those. And then power and data plans. So this is something that you will probably have to do a lot within a project. So power and data is indicating all the different power receptacles and data receptacles. So things like electrical outlets, Ethernet ports, Ethernet port locations, the type of receptacles, all of that needs to be indicated on a plan so that an installer knows where all those things need to be located whenever they're building it. So you can see we have all these different symbols here, which are indicating different things. So this one here is indicating GFCIs, which you're always going to have next to sinks. And then these ones here without that are just indicating regular old receptacle outlets. And then these triangles are probably indicating some sort of data or phone line. So again, these are going to be referred to on a legend that you can go and look at. So that triangle is just indicating a data wall outlet. The one with the circle is a floor outlet. One with a square is a duplex outlet, GFCI outlet, regular duplex outlet, single outlet, triplex outlet. So you have all different kinds, and you're going to need to show these on the plan wherever they're located. All right, and the locations of these are going to be determined through a combination of building code requirements. So you're going to have like electrical codes that are going to denote where things need to be placed for access, but also the program of the project itself. So the different uses of the different spaces. So you might not always have data hookups in every single room. It just depends on what the space is being used for and the requirements of that particular space. Okay. But I think that is it for this drawing set. So, it's not a full professional set. Definitely not as detailed as a real professional set would be. But hopefully this just gives you a good overall idea of what you can expect to include within a CD set. We also have things I missed here, like door schedules and door types, like I indicated. So we would have on the floor plan a door tag that would tie back to these door schedules, and that's where you would see all the information about what type of a door that is, the material, the size, all of that. And we have elevations and stuff to show all that. But that's a good sort of slice of what all goes into a CD set, a really good sampler. So then going forward with this module, we're going to be working a lot in Revit, and I'm going to be showing you how we're going to be producing all of these different types of drawings that you're seeing here and different techniques that you can use within your projects going forward, because there's different ways that you can do things, but I'm going to try to show you like sort of the best way that you can using the tools that you have available to you. So that's going to do it for this video. And then going forward, just keep an eye out for those Revit videos that I'll be posting, and refer to those for how we're going to be creating these drawings going forward.